Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter in Coral Gables, Florida. We're here at the Hispanic Leadership Conference. Joining us is a very special guest, former Governor Tim Pawlenty. He has served 2 terms in the Minnesota Governor's Mansion. He's been touted as a possible 2012 GOP presidential candidate. And in 2008, he was on John McCain's short list of potential running mates. Governor Pawlenty is now out with a new book, an autobiography called Courage to Stand, an American Story. Welcome back to Newsmax TV, Governor.
It's great to be with you, Kathleen.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you. It was a lot of work, but I'm glad I'm able to share some of the lessons and experiences I've learned along the way, not just as governor, but earlier in life as well.
Well, I look forward to talking to you about it.
Thank you.
First, some questions regarding recent current events. The nation is still reeling from that tragic shooting in Tucson that left 6 people dead and 13 others wounded, including Arizona Democrat Gabrielle Giffords. Why do you think that during this time of tragedy, the left is blaming conservatives on the right?
Well, first of all, our hearts and minds and prayers go out to those who have loved ones who lost lives or are injured and are in recovery now, and we want to continue with that spirit in mind. Number 2, people should not use these kinds of tragedies for political purposes, particularly when the facts are inaccurate. And you had in the opening minutes of this tragedy and the opening hours after, people assigning blame, political blame, to certain individuals or certain media outlets, and it turned out to be inaccurate. These are the actions of a mentally deranged individual who, sadly, they sometimes do irrational and reckless things. And that's what this is about. And to falsely accuse others is unfair. And that's why in leadership, people who are in positions, whether it's president, governor, legislator, business, or community leaders, they need to make sure they lead with a sense in crisis of calm and stability. We can't have good outcomes unless we have good information and good decision making. And you can't do that if you are people are spreading false stuff. And that's what happened here.
Talk radio, Rush Limbaugh, Sarah Palin have all been blamed. Sarah Palin is now the subject of a 4-minute video of hate tweets calling for her death. What is your reaction to that?
Sarah Palin was falsely accused here. I mean, there are people who intimated or came right out and alleged that she was to blame in whole or in part for this terrible tragedy. I had a similar experience in Minnesota when that 35W bridge fell, and I referenced this in the book. People in the opening minutes of that tragedy, while people were still being rescued out of the water and the bridge collapse, were saying, you know, we're going to use this to carve the governor up politically, and they were making accusations about why the bridge fell. And when we finally got the official word on why the bridge fell, all of that turned out to be inaccurate. And so people in crisis, we need to make sure we have our hearts and our minds in the right place, that we're conveying accurate information. That doesn't mean if something goes wrong, we don't hold people accountable. But leaders have to be responsible for being fair and accurate.
Now, there have been calls by some for a return to the fairness doctrine, to reinstitute the fairness doctrine. Do you think we should?
No, I don't. I think this is a country that our fundamental tenets include free speech. And so people should be free to say what they want to say with passion and conviction. But just because you have a right doesn't mean you have to take it to a level of inaccuracy or unfairness. So it's really important that this incident now not become a reason to try to deter or chill or intimidate others. I mean, if you want to say, Kathleen, that you want to use a metaphor that might involve boxing or some sort of metaphor, we don't want people saying, hey, you can't say that because it involves, a boxing, and boxing involves punching, and punching is violence, and you can no longer speak like that. This is America. We have free speech rights, but just because we have those rights, we need to make sure that people exercise them responsibly, but it's up to each person as to how they do that, not the government or some authority or fairness doctrine. That being said, when you look at the great communicators and great leaders, they not just point out problems. They're not just cynics and critics. We have to diagnose the problem. But you look at somebody like Ronald Reagan. Then he said, but we can do this. There is a better way forward. There is a positive hope and vision for our country. So leaders also have to not just admire the problem, they also have to offer a positive pathway forward, a solution.
Let's talk about your book, Courage to Stand, which is a fantastic read. In it, you denounce runaway spending in Washington, and you blame the Obama administration for a mountain of debt. You allowed more than one government shutdown during your tenure in Minnesota. Is this something that the Republicans should consider to push for a balanced federal budget or to prevent the debt ceiling from being raised?
Our great nation is facing a crisis in part because the government's out of control, and it's particularly out of control with its spending. and it's going to take us into a deep hole even further than we already are. And so the federal government, state government, local governments have to draw lines in the sand and say the first order of business is to not make it worse. And I hope we can get consensus on that. But our team, the ones who just got elected, the majority in the Congress, and all the other conservatives and Republicans said, look, if you elect us this time, we're actually going to do this stuff. Well, now we need to do it. And I hope that can be done constructively, but sometimes it requires some very tough decision making and some very tough political battles. And for me, I had to draw the line in the sand. I had lawsuits. I set a record for vetoes. I had a government shutdown. I did $3 billion of unallotment in a very liberal state, but it needed to be done, and we battled hard.
Let's talk about 2012, because your name keeps coming up as being a potential GOP presidential candidate. Do you plan to run for president?
I'm seriously considering it. I'm going to make that decision final here in the next couple of months.
And why run?
The country's in trouble, and I think based on my experience in Minnesota of driving down spending, reducing taxes, reforming education, using market-based health care reforms instead of government-based health care reforms, and now I have a state that has an unemployment rate that's lower than the national average, growing jobs now faster than the national average, significantly faster in many other things. I think I have some lessons and some experience that would be helpful for the country that I love.
Well, the book is called Courage to Stand. Governor Tim Pawlenty, thanks so much for joining us, and again, congratulations on the book.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.